Okay, so there are, in my handbook, the Mr. White Handbook of Watercolor Painting, there's a couple of rules that I have that usually turn out to be fairly accurate. Generally, you do light stuff first. So if you had, let's say, white areas in there that are truly white, that's the paper you're going to use. So you kind of circle those and say have that as like a no paint zone. But you also want to do lighter stuff first as you work through it. Then you're gradually get darker and darker as you go along. Another rule of watercolor painting that I have is you want to do the big stuff first. So you want to work on the bigger, larger areas first, and then you gradually get down to the detail. The third one that I like to follow is you do the stuff in back first. And so you build it forward so you have a natural overlapping going on. It helps facilitate the look that you're trying to do. And so with that, the one part I wanted to do is as I get started in thinking about what do I want to do, one of the biggest areas on here is actually the sky area in the background over here. It's fairly large, takes up a lot of areas. Some of these other pieces are broken up into smaller bits. And so I want to do that one first. In order to do that, I hope this doesn't mess with everybody's brain, but I'm going to turn it upside down. That's just because I want to work on this area right here. And so if it's too difficult on that one, please stand on your head and just kind of look at it upside right. So here's the deal. I'm going to put a little bit of water into the tray. Boom, 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 right there. Water into the blue is what I'm looking for. And I usually use the first stuff is doing a little bit with a wet into wet and trying to make sure things happen there. So this is just water here, and I'm just introducing water into the paper. You also do your wet into wet stuff. A lot of times you do that first or first-ish. Notice I haven't really got right to the lines of it all. I haven't painted right up to those, but this is just to introduce water into the area because you're making one big puddle at first. And so I used a bigger brush to do that. Now I'm going to go back in, I'm going to get my paints, and now I can come back in here, and as I drop that in, I can paint with the tip of the brush. This is why I needed to turn it upside down, because I use the tip of the brush to make the boundaries, to make the lines here. So I can use the tip of the brush here as I make that puddle. Now blue, a lot of times, depending on what blue it is more of a staining pigment. And so if you let it sit for too long, it creates a stain on the paper. But because this is just all water here, it doesn't do that as much. Here's some more blue, and I'm just taking this and spreading it around in the puddle. It's a light blue on the application. And we let the water spread it around. If we need more water, we go and get it. Here's some more blue, just dab it in there. And it can be more moving and shaking. It doesn't have to cover completely. And I'm not worried about the stuff, the littler stuff inside, but this will work for us here. And so that's going to come up here. Once again, the tip of the brush is a great tool. It can help define where things are. Let's go this way. That's an awkward angle, isn't it? I don't advise it. So we got a blue sky going on. Kind of like that. So, and like I said, I like having some of those white areas in here. Let's make it a darker blue at the top. A lot of times as things go up, they get a little bit darker, particularly when it comes with atmosphere. And generally, I think that you need to have, if you just have a pure color straight out of the tube or straight out of the tray, however you want to say that. This is just water. I'm going to scrub this in here. If it's just a straight color, it's too intense. And it doesn't work as well for you. So let's, for the sake of making that just slightly different, this is some purple. And I'm just going to dab some of the purple in here. Remember I said you do some of your wet stuff first. So I want this to be kind of moving and shaking, and so it's not a solid light to dark. This little corner was starting to dry a little bit, so I'm going to come back and re-wet that and move some of this pigment. Now, here's what I can do as well. If you want the pigment to run a little bit so that it does gather darkness around the top edge of the painting, you can tilt it on its side and it will start to run and then pool down here. I think I need a few dots or dashes of the blue as well, just because, and then I'm going to let that sit. Maybe do something like that. Now, if you get too much pigment or too much paint in a given area, you can take your brush, this is example, just dip it in here and then squeegee it out, and then you can use that to suck up your extra pigment if you want. If there's too much pigment in there. I could probably go down here and pull out some of this if I wanted it lighter. Something like that. And so that's my first application of the paint. I'll flip it back right side up so you can kind of see what happened. Sometimes when you look it upside down, you're not sure what the heck is going on. Now, I can take a smaller brush, and there are some areas in here that need painting, right? Like right in here. I've just got a smaller brush so I can put that blue, that light blue in there. Unfortunately, with the graphite pencil that I used was a real dark, heavy one, and so I pick up just a little bit of graphite in there too. It's kind of funny. But it does need to be mostly water. I'm going to fill in this area. So I need some blue sky. Now, if I wanted to have, you know, a true highlight on some of these areas in here, you know, I could leave that. I'm just going to go across here and hope that I don't get too much graphite in there. Because the problem with the graphite is once you pick it up and it gets introduced into the watercolor paint itself, it doesn't really come out. It's kind of permanent. Got a little bit of a place where the puddle started to dry a little bit here, so I'm going to go back in and scrub that out a little bit so I didn't have that happening. Okay, so that's our first application of the paint. That's the part that's in back. It's fairly light and it's fairly large, so that's a good reason to paint that part first.